You're going on a journey into the unknown. And the unknown is a place that you will never experience like anything else before. Civil discussions, unpopular opinions, and most of all, it's taken place on the internet. People will say it's a myth, but today, that myth will turn into a historical fact. This is the Hot Takes for Nerds podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Hot Takes for Nerds podcast. This is a podcast where I invite people on as special guests, and we discuss movies or television shows that are usually outside of the popular mainstream opinion. Sometimes we'll have hot takes on a particular medium, and a guest will disagree with that, but we can also universally agree on a specific opinion that is a hot take compared to the mainstream opinion, and have an in-depth discussion about that as well. But again, the main point is we have hot takes, and we're going to have a conversation about it. I'm, of course, not alone. I have two special guests. I have Steve from Film Trigger. Say hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
We're funny, aren't we? And we
also I'm here all week. Try the veal.
And we also have Christopher Durban from Durbania. Say hello,
What's
Durban.
up? So excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. This is awesome.
Okay, so how you guys been doing? You guys been doing all right?
I got coffee, so I'm doing great right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
I haven't had coffee in a while. I've been starting to drink matcha now. It's like caffeinated green tea. It's not necessarily coffee, but it's got caffeine in it.
No, nothing replaces coffee. I mean, sure, you can drink something else with caffeine, but coffee is coffee. So, I don't know.
Well, it's healthier. I could say that. It's more so green tea is supposed to be like healthier than coffee. I mean, I don't think that there's
black. Then it's perfectly healthy. It's like a
No. I've drank coffee black before, and I thought it was disgusting.
Yeah, I like my coffee black, but I don't drink coffie very often. What I do this to myself. If I find myself leaning on something a little too much, a little too dependent on it for like energy, I just kind of stop doing it for a while. So that's where I'm at right now with coffee.
That's probably very wise. But
it's kind of the same with me with energy drinks. I like. My grandmother, I call her Nanny, she said that like energy drinks, they give you like this boost of energy, but it doesn't do good for your heart. And she witnessed like other people who have like been this obsessed with energy drinks so that they could be able to wake up. But apparently they had too much to the point where they had to go to the hospital, and eventually some would probably they pretty much ended their life because of that.
Yeah, I drank an energy drink one time and I got really shaky, like really shaky. And then I got home from work and I said, "Hey, Laura, let's go for a walk. Can we go for a walk? Let's go for a walk around the block." And
that's exactly what I imagined. Just you,
she was walking, and I thought I was walking, but she was so slow in comparison to my walking. Like I'm halfway down the block, and she's still by the house, and I'm like, "Why am I going so fast? Why are you going so slow? Come on, let's walk." I don't drink this anymore.
It's kind of like that movie Yes Men with Jim Carrey where he's just obsessed, and like I don't know if you guys ever seen this movie, but there was this moment where he was high on Red Bull and he was just having this full bit of energy with Zooey Deschanel, and it was just like on this huge hiking trip, and then he crashed immediately at the end. So
that was the crash is pretty intense.
Yeah, that's kind of the same situation with me. I used to have Red Bull when I used to work at a grocery store at Kroger, just so that I can have some amount of energy, because I didn't like working at a grocery store at all. But after a while, I just started getting queasy, so I decided to stop drinking energy drinks, and I stopped drinking coffee, which led me to drinking matcha.
Oh, there you go.
But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about some hot takes here. Some of the movies that we're going to be talking about are mostly Phase 4 of the MCU and Dune, and I actually asked you guys if you had like an overrated and an underrated movie that you would like to go ahead and talk about in this discussion. That's sort of a thing that I want to do with every podcast that I have, in every episode that I have within this podcast that I'm doing. I wanted to see what movie you would find to be overrated and what movie you would find to be underrated, and share that in the discussion in case we feel the opposite, or it's basically like the mainstream opinion. If most of the people universally agree that they love that movie, but you have a hot take on it, whether it's overrated or underrated.
I got some. Oh.
Yeah. That's basically what we're going to talk about as well. But let's go ahead and first of all talk about the movie Dune. And that's a movie that all three of us have actually seen. It's been released on HBO Max. It's a very popular, highly anticipated movie by a lot of people within the movie fan community. People who love the books were really excited to see this. People who love Denis Villeneuve's projects were really excited to see about this. I was more so just curious to see about it because I like Denis Villeneuve. I like most of his projects. I like Arrival. I enjoyed Blade Runner 2049. I enjoyed Prisoners. I think that one was my favorite. So I was curious to see what Dune was, and the responses on this movie are apparently mixed. First of all, Steve, what did you think about this movie?
I'm part of that mixed aspect because, and we had a big discussion about this on my channel also. I didn't know anything about Dune going into it. I've never experienced Dune. I never saw the previous movie. I never read any of the books. I was going into it as a Dune virgin. And and in doing so, I felt completely lost for most of the movie. There was a point in time because I streamed it. Everyone's like, "Oh, why did you stream it? You need to go see it in theaters." I'm like, calm down. No, I'm going to stream it. If I like it, then I'll go see it in theaters. But I almost turned it off like at one point in time. But I put myself through it, and by the third act, I ended up starting to like put the pieces together. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm starting to get into it. All right, let's do this. And then the credits rolled. Yeah, I was mad about it. Like there was a whole bunch of things I didn't like, but after talking to people, I was wrong about a lot of my aspects. But my aspects being, oh, I've seen this before through Star Wars or Avatar. Like I've seen this before, and then I found out, well, Dune was written before Star Wars, so like my aspect of it was skewed because I didn't know the history of it. But as a regular movie goer, somebody which is a lot of the audience, I could see why this is a very divisive film.
Yeah, it's odd because I've seen from some that they didn't necessarily care for the second half, but really enjoyed the first half. So this movie is definitely divisive amongst a lot of people. And I guess that's like the meaning of film. Like it doesn't necessarily matter, or there isn't an objective fact here that states what is actually right and wrong, or what people usually like and what people usually don't like. This movie is like all over the place with some people. There are some people that have read the books and loved it. Some people who, I don't even know if there are people who read the books and don't like it though. I don't know if I have heard of that. Have any of you guys heard of that before?
I don't know.
No, it seems like the people that like it are the people that know about it. They say it was a great adaptation. They know the book and they completely respect it. As a matter of fact, I run an open mic for musicians every Sunday, and last Sunday was Halloween. We had costumes. I had one of the people come out dressed as a Dune character just to troll me because he loves the book, and so he was dressed up as Dune, like, dude, you got to read the book. You got to read the book. They seem to be really that's who this movie was made for. It seems like.
Yeah, it does seem like it was made for people who do love the books, because I have listened to the audiobook version, not all of it, only like I guess like a quarter of it, and it is following along a lot of the aspects of what this movie is doing, and I was able to understand it a little bit more because I was listening to the audiobook. But even if you didn't listen to it, some people were saying like that they are lost. But even if people who didn't look at the audiobook, they said that it was still a great movie. So Durban, what did you think about the movie? Because I know that you're a person that enjoyed it a lot more.
I really did enjoy it a lot more. I never read the book. In college, I really tried. I got, and I still remember this, 91 pages in. Could have been 101. Either way, in that window, I got that far into it, and I went, this is just too weird. I can't do it. But I do have a history with Dune, a little bit more with Steve, because growing up, my mom loves sci-fi, fantasy, and action. And so she loved the 1984 Dune movie. So that movie was just this integral part of my childhood. It's just one of those movies that was always on in a rotation in my house. But it's weird because, I watched all kinds of weird movies as a kid. But Dune was just one of those that was so strange. And honestly, I just think it's a badly done movie. Because that 1984 version, every time I watch it, I immediately forget everything about it as soon as the credits roll. Like, my brain could not retain it It was so weird and so strange. The bad guy, the Baron, was so unbelievably over the top. Like there was just so many weird things about it. So it's part of my history. It's somewhere in the back of my mind. And this director, I liked Arrival. I have a few mixed feelings on it, but I like it. Blade Runner 2049, I did not like. I thought it was too boring. I love the visual effects. I love the music, but that's one movie that I think is so overrated. And I feel like people only say they love it because they want to sound as artistic as possible, because it's like, really, that movie is so long and so boring. So I've kind of had a mixed reception with this director, but I figured Dune is a perfect project for him. And I was right, man. Oh my gosh, I really enjoyed this movie, and I enjoyed it way more than I thought. I think this director's, the way he paces things and the way he tells the story with visuals and sound, and bringing Hans Zimmer into that, like, it just worked for me. It was the first time I was able to watch this movie and comprehend it, to the point that I went back to watch the 1984 movie, and not only could I now follow it because I understood from, the new movie, but I was able to pick up on some things that, oh man, I wish the new movie actually included this, because it could have explained this better. But there is a part 2 coming, and I'm sure part 2 will get into some of those things part 1 didn't explain. But I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was a really good movie. I thought the story was really interesting, and I was super excited to be able to keep pace with it and follow the story and follow all of the weirdness and enjoy the weirdness.
This is fascinating.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, this is fascinating because, like, we have Durban, who looked at the book, not just the audiobook, but actually read the book, and then also watched the movie, and then also watched this brand new movie, and then figured out how he was able to enjoy it. But we also have Steve, who never seen any of this stuff and walked into this film and then didn't necessarily care for it that much. And then we have me, who listened to, well, actually, I walked in with not knowing anything about it at first, and then saw the movie, and then I listened to the audiobook, and I'm still kind of conflicted. So this one is, it's just fascinating to see how we can all have, like, some amount of perspective of what this movie is, considering, like, whether we read the book or not read the book, still have some enjoyment of it, or whether or not we actually enjoy the book or not enjoy the book and see the movie and we actually do enjoy it. That to me is just fascinating to see how diverse and how different this movie is compared to all of our opinions on this movie. So what was it you're going to say, Steve?
Oh, I was just going to make note of another interesting aspect to it is the fact that, I gave this movie like I think a C- in my review for it, but its potential for rewatchability is actually pretty up there. Like I haven't been able to yet, but I wouldn't mind rewatching it now that I've gotten that first reaction out of the way. Maybe I might go see it in theaters now and just check it out. And now that I know a little bit more behind it, I could see myself enjoying it more during the second watch than I did.
You need to watch that 84 movie, like we said on your channel. You should watch that. You should watch that. Give you new respect.
And then, also, I am actually, again, like in that third act, I got pumped for, okay, now I'm grabbing onto the story a little bit more. So I am excited to see this part 2 for this. Like, I'm glad it got greenlit and we're officially getting a part 2. So even though my review for it is a little on the lower end of the scale, I do think there's still potential for me to be a fan of this movie.
Yeah, I think there's potential for me to be a fan as well. Like, I'm still conflicted. I've only seen the movie once. I haven't necessarily seen it again. I tried listening to the audiobook version of this and see if this was going to help me understand it better. I understand it a little bit more, but I am still lost on what this is. And I know that Matthew Haynes, he's kind of talked to me, well, not like talked to me, he's like responded to me about this, about how the movie is like 3 books combined into one. And I'm kind of impressed that this movie is trying to be as cohesive as it is, to say that this is like 3 books in one movie, and to see it being as coherent as it is. It's kind of impressive at that aspect, but I'm still lost on some of the, I don't know, like in terms of their mission, what's going on. In terms of like trying to understand the lore of it.
Go back to that 1984 movie. It's about the same length as our current movie, but they did the whole book. So they didn't divide it into two. The whole book is in there, and it's completely incoherent. And this new movie, like you just said, because I want to harp on that point, like it's coherent, and I liked it. But I get why there's some really weird things in here, and part of it is Paul's destiny. Like, what is he fighting against? And so the one thing I think the 1984 movie did slightly better, but worse at the same time, is the 1984 movie opens where we see the Emperor and we see the planet where he rules from, and he lays out his nefarious plan. That's the part that's bad. Like, it's kind of cheesy and annoying and 100% exposition. But at the same time, it really sets the tone as to how important Paul Atreides is, what his calling is, and how his destiny as a Messiah is to lead the galaxy from darkness into light. And then you could kind of see the Star Wars in there, where George Lucas may have got some inspiration with Luke Skywalker, the light side of the Force, and trying to bring balance to the Force, because it is kind of that same deal. Paul Atreides is a Messiah that is destined to lead the galaxy into light. But it's kind of hard to follow, and I hope part 2 gets into the stuff that I think the 84 movie might have done a little bit of a better job doing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think, and it's not like the way that you described it, Durban, it's not like I don't understand their philosophy. Well, at first I didn't, but then when I read the audiobook, I did. And I understand that this movie was mostly like, it's kind of like politics, like understanding how important the spice is, and understanding why it, when talking about these other, how do you say it, districts that they're trying
houses,
to be, and houses or whatever it is that they're trying to get in negotiation with, like whatever Oscar Isaac is talking to these other group of people that are talking about spice and how important it is. It's still like hard to follow because politics themselves are still frustrating to follow as well.
Well, and that's where I came up with the comparison of Avatar in my head. Like I was seeing, the prequels to Star Wars with all the politics of the things going on, and then you have the spice, and they are mining the spice, and it's a very important part of their culture, what makes them that house who they are. But it reminded me of Avatar with the tree of life and or not tree of life, the metal stuff that they're
unobtainium.
Thank you. They have all these other people from other planets coming to mine this this metal, for whatever reasons it helps their whatever cause. But I don't know, during the whole movie I just kept, all I did was compare it to other films that I've seen before, and that's where my mind was most of this movie. But I guess it's original idea. Obviously, they came first, so I need to rewatch it with that lens on.
The politics is really hard to follow because not only do you have like all of this kind of spiritual stuff that you're supposed to follow with Dune and understand, but there's so much, and that like I followed the kind of spiritual side of it way better watching it. That was the part that was the most cohesive to me. So my one kind of flaw with this new movie is the fact that the politics are harder to follow. And that's what I meant by the 1984 movie, because when he lays out his nefarious plan in the first 2 minutes of it, it's like, well, at least I can follow that. I mean, it's corny how he said it, but okay, I get what's happening. And so I'm hoping part 2 does something where we can follow the politics a little bit easier. And I feel like I can sort of follow it, but it's really... Yeah, the politics is the hardest part to follow, to understand why they want the House Harkonnen to leave, why they want Atreides to take it, why the Emperor even wants this war to begin with. And so I don't know that I can even fully explain that right now, because I still have to digest that.
Yeah, and it's like I've seen some other comments. Like I've watched Griffin Schiller's video from FilmSpeak, why he was like, there was something missing to this movie and why I couldn't necessarily connect to it. There's like details missing. And the comment section of that, which I know, like relying on the comment section of what they're talking about, who knows, maybe they're legit because they probably read the book. But anyways, they said that this whole movie was more so like setup. And it was set up to go ahead and create a part 2 of Dune. That's why so many information was probably missing, even though this movie is like 3 books in one.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's actually funny because the 84 movie and this movie have opposite problems. So the 1984 movie does a really good job with all of this setup. So then when you get to the point where this present movie ends and the 1984 movie keeps going, the 1984 movie speeds through the entire second half so fast. Like, apparently Paul lives with these people for about 2 years. And the 1984 movie speeds through that time, covers it over in real quick narration, and you miss so much. So there's a whole lot of the spiritual side and the war and him being the Messiah that you miss with the 84 movie. But in the 84 movie, you get all this political setup. Whereas I feel like this movie, when I was watching it, I had a hard time following the political setup, but the kind of spiritual side of it made sense to me.
And I think I want to point out that maybe this movie would have worked a lot better if it was a show. Because that's probably why Game of Thrones worked, because that's a show that is kind of about politics, but also has like its own, like, say, spiritual element. It has dragons inside of it, and even though I didn't necessarily watch the full show, I only watched like 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, I was able to understand the characters, how I was able to be like on their side and figure out like, or get invested within them, understand their position, why they're doing what it is that they're doing. And when I look at the movie Dune and seeing like this so much information being pushed in when it talks about like politics, and then it talks about like the sci-fi aspects, and then when it talks about the spirituality of things, and when it talks about like other unknown stuff that is supposed to be set up for the next movie, it's like it's so much for me to be contained in a movie in general, where I'm supposed to care about everything and also get invested and see all of this other stuff that's supposed to be awesome. It's just a lot. It could have worked better as a show in my eyes.
I think that depends on your integrity as a filmmaker. I mean, when you adapt such a rich book into a movie, you're obviously not going to be able to get it all in there. And not every director wants to be like, okay, well, let's make it a TV series then, just so we can get it all, panned out the way I want to tell it. When you are a storyteller, a director, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take these aspects and I'm going to focus on these mostly. And if you want to know more, my job is not only to give you a great entertaining movie, but maybe to lead you to the book itself. The thing that I grew up and loved. That's my goal. I don't know if that's his goal, but that's just how I would see that. Because imagine you wanting to take, certain aspects of your favorite book, and someone's like, well, let's turn it into a series. You're like, yeah, but no, I want this to be a big cinematic event. So I think it depends on where your integrity is when it comes to creating content. Obviously maybe another director would have been like, yeah, episodes, that's where I want to go, because I want to tell this story exactly from the book and how I experienced it reading the book. But maybe this director didn't want to do that. He's like, listen, there's enough here, give me 2 or 3 really good movies and or 2 or 3 movies and let me have my control over it, and I'm going to give you something that is pretty supplemental for the book. Just my opinion there.
And I feel like I'm a little bit more forgiving of some of the flaws and things that aren't fully explained, just because I know there's a part 2 coming. And I feel like part 1 was pretty detailed. It was pretty intricate because it was long. They took their time with the pacing. And if they do the same thing with part 2, because part 2 is now focusing on a whole different aspect of their lives and where they're at. We have to get into Paul's visions becoming reality. We have to get into the why. Do we need these things to become reality? And so we have part 2 coming, and I think I'm just a little bit more forgiving of some of the flaws of part 1. I think I'm more forgiving of the things I don't understand in part 1, because I'm thinking in 2 years when we finally get part 2, hopefully, because the story's not complete. Hopefully, with a complete story from part 2, it'll make a lot more sense.
Yeah, and I think that's how it's going to go, Durbin. I really do. Again, me having a low review about this movie, it still says a lot that I'm.
Well, you didn't give it an F or a D,
right? Well, it still says a lot that I'm interested in watching the story pan out and continue. He did a good job, really grabbing me in at the very end, with enough faith to, when the second one comes out, I think I will see it, and I just might see it in theaters, so I think that he did a great job with that.
It may be a matter of perspective, but sometimes I'm a little hesitant when they decided to say, let's set all of this up and then save it for the second film,
Yeah.
Just because it's a little bit hesitant for me, because if the second film doesn't get made, why should I enjoy the first one then?
Yeah.
Because sometimes if it's like the Amazing Spider-Man movies. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, they tried to do this whole entire setup for the Sinister Six in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but the Amazing Spider-Man 3 never happened. And so the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is just like, well, we have all this other stuff that you decided to really focus on, and then this other movie never get made. So,
yeah.
And it just made the film worse for me.
Well, that's a huge flaw here because, I mean, that's what they did with Lord of the Rings. They shot an entire trilogy like one movie. So each book, it was all shot. It was all done when the first movie came out. They were in post-production on the other two. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why they wouldn't do the same thing with Dune. I guess I could understand.
They could.
Yeah, and they should. I mean, I guess I could understand from a studio perspective, especially Warner Brothers, who doesn't trust anything with DC, would be like, look, I don't know if this is going to be successful, so we're not going to do that. But there is wisdom in doing that because it shows confidence in the product. You are telling the full, complete story. So when part one just kind of ends at that place where it ended, you go, well, in a few months I got part two because it's already done. So like your expectations in a different place. Unlike what you just said, Chandler, where it's true, where it's like, yeah, we got Amazing Spider-Man 2, all this setup, and it went nowhere. And so there's that moment where we're holding our breath like, will part two get greenlit? I'm glad it did, but it should have already been done.
Yeah, I think the operative part of your argument there is Warner Brothers. You know, that's that's the key
that's
right
the ticky thing.
I mean, because if you break it down, I don't really know. I'm not going to claim that I know financials of movie budgets and what have you, but I would assume it would tentatively be cheaper to shoot it all as one movie as opposed to closing down production, then greenlighting the new one, and then shooting it as a whole different production.
Yeah,
you know. But Warner Brothers, you're right, Durban. They really just don't trust anybody except Margot Robbie. They trust her in anything.
Yeah, apparently they trust her. They shouldn't even trust themselves. Look at the Justice League.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But Warner Brothers. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't presented to them. You know, like, hey, I want to shoot this as one thing and then separate out into two different movies, and they're like, let's just see what the money says after the first one. I think
Dune
Warner
is
Brothers
too complex for that. Like, seriously, like I like the idea of dividing it into more than one movie so you can tell a more complete story. But I feel like it's definitely one that should have been like Lord of the Rings, where you should have shot it as one solid movie and then divide that into two parts. Because, I get it. It's for a niche audience. You know, it's for like people who love Dune. But you know what? That audience exists. And I think they proved even with the simultaneous release that they made the money and success that Warner Brothers was looking for. So it's like, gosh, you guys should have just taken a chance, and then we could be gearing up now for the second one.
I don't know if I want Dune to be like Lord of the Rings, because I did watch the not too long ago the theatrical versions of Lord of the Rings because I wanted to read the books again, or read the books for the first time, and then watch the extended cuts and see comparisons of the difference between all of these other ones. But that's a whole different story. But watching the theatrical versions, I realized that on that journey, they made the characters likable, and they definitely had this mythology to them that was very much important. But they were able to explain what their mythology was and had like a mindset goal of understanding these specific characters have motivations and ambitions to do what it is that they do, and then give them personalities on how you're able to like them and how you're able to be relatable to them. Like sometimes they're not necessarily going on a serious mission, but they're not necessarily being as philosophical as Dune is. They do have a philosophy for them, but it's not as serious and to the point where that philosophy is like the central focus of the film, like Dune is. Lord of the Rings is more so like the character arcs of these characters and their ambitions and motivations. Just the whole story of the characters themselves in Lord of the Rings is kind of the forefront of those three movies, which is why it works as a trilogy. With Dune, it seems like that it's not just the characters themselves that is the point of these films existing. It is pretty much like this whole concept of like politics, spirituality, sci-fi, all this other aspects that they want to put in head first for this movie. And that's why, in my perspective, it would work better if they wanted to do all of those aspects and have them be the central focus. It would have worked better as a television show, because that's what I saw when I watched Game of Thrones. Like, it was focusing on characters, the politics, and the spirituality all at the exact same time. And we were able to we were able to connect with that a lot more better than if it was being transformed into a movie. But that's my side of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. This is rumors from the internet, so I guess take it for what it's worth. I did hear rumors that they would do like the rest of the Dune Messiah books and turn that into an HBO Max series after the movie. So we might be getting that.
I read that too.
Yeah. So we probably will be getting a series based off of the other books. And I would be curious to see how that goes, how they build out the lore and stuff. Because I remember the Sci-Fi Channel tried to take all of this on, I think, back in the year 2000. And I've only seen that miniseries one time, right when it initially aired. But I think they tried to tackle everything. They redid Dune. They did Children of Dune. And like they went through a ton of the Dune books and did it all as a miniseries. But I can't even remember it now. So that shows you how well that stuck with me.
Yeah. That I would be interested to see a show, honestly.
Yeah, no, I'd be curious about that. It's an interesting world, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've talked all that we could about this movie Dune. So yeah, this is a very fascinating movie to just have like all differing opinions. It's just a fascinating movie to talk about in general. I would like to see it again. Hopefully I'll be able to like it a little more if I can be able to go ahead and get through the audiobook, the first audiobook, and I don't know if I could be able to go ahead and read the other two, because, man, that one was just a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. If I ever read it, I mean, there's tons of books. There's not just like 7 or something. There's like a ton, double digits. So it's like, I think I'll just read the first one.
Yeah, Matthew said that there was like 20 books, to be honest.
I think there is. I think it was written by Frank Herbert, and then I think his son picked up after him and continued the series. So, yeah.
Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU of Phase 4. And so far, it's getting pretty divisive. I don't think the MCU shows have gotten somewhat divisive, but they're mostly getting more likes than dislikes with their shows. The movies have been a lot more divisive in my eyes. And not even like in the MCU, but like outside of it, like Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I heard that one is pretty much as divisive as it can be. Yeah. But with Phase 4 of the MCU and the Marvel movies, like especially with Eternals now released, it's actually the lowest rated Marvel film in the cinematic universe. It's actually, last time I checked, it's at like a 50%. I'm gonna check it really quick and see if it actually
below Dark World. Like, did it do that?
It went below Dark World, in all honesty. But it went down lower. It's now at a 48% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, MCU fans feel what we DC fans have been feeling for a very long time.
Yeah. I actually read this comment.
Superman right there.
I actually read this, this comment. I think you guys know about this, but somebody posted on it. I think it was Rudy that posted it on Facebook saying, like, you see this? Like, breathe it in, DC fans. And then Al Sewer just commented on saying, like, that's still higher than most DC movies, in all honesty.
It's true, but it's that same kind of outrage feeling of, why can't you guys just like this stuff?
Well, when it comes to, like, the TV shows, like I'm a big fan of Loki. I'm a moderate fan of the WandaVision. I'm looking forward to Hawkeye. I really am. Like, I really like the vibe that it gave off. And, like, finally Hawkeye can be cool. But when it comes to the cinematic universe, like the movies that come out in theaters, I just haven't been interested in it. I respect what they're doing. I respect them, breaking the formula and trying something new. But, as for me, MCU ended with Endgame, and I'm okay with that. But doesn't mean I'm not fully on board for whatever else could come. I am looking forward to future projects, but what they have right now, that's for an audience that's not me.
In terms of movies, it's been very lukewarm for me, because I love the MCU, and they've still earned the right to take my money. So they put out new stuff, I'll be there. Black Widow, I didn't love. I didn't hate it. but it definitely came out at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Black Widow was a sequel to a first movie that never existed, and honestly, it needed to, because I needed more than what I got. I needed more of the Red Room. I needed more of her history than just Age of Ultron flashbacks to get more emotionally connected to what was going on in Black Widow. And Black Widow devalues other superheroes. She is a mere mortal who gets blown up in a truck. It rolls 52 times. It slams into a pole, and she gets out and fights. She falls off a falling silo, falls down a side of a building, hitting the pipes and the stairs and the trash can on her way down like frickin' John Wick, and then stands up. And I'm like, okay, so Steve Rogers having the super soldier serum apparently means nothing in this universe.
Not to mention she was on a bunch of buildings that were exploding in midair and was jumping upon other buildings to other buildings without a scratch on her face.
Yeah, and so like things like that are just, it's not that I hate the action scenes, right? That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just looking at it like, okay, you've got to explain this then. If you're going to do this to her, was she experimented on with a different variation of super soldier serum? Like, you've got to draw me in and make it more interesting, because you've just devalued everybody else. And so that's my problem with Black Widow. And then what was the next one? Shang-Chi. I think that was just fun. Like, I love kung fu movies, and I love sci-fi. I love fantasy. I feel like that movie covers it all. But it's not a movie that goes, yes, that's the next phase of the MCU, and I'm beyond excited. It's just, no, it's a fun kung fu movie, like a Jackie Chan movie that I could just pop in and have fun with. So it go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's another one I haven't seen, Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And again, it has a lot to do with the fact that I'm just not the right audience for it. You know, like I'm not into kung fu movies. You know, I don't have that interest peaked or anything like this. You know, and then Eternals looks a lot like Dune to me. You know, like something I'm going to go into not knowing anything about, and I feel like I'm going to need to know all this history.
Honestly, Steve, it was a lot like Dune, because you do need to go into it knowing a lot of this history. It moves at a slower pace like Dune, but Dune was 2.5 hours, where at the end of it, I wanted more. This movie, I think, was 2.5 hours movie, but it felt so much longer, and I was ready for it to be over by the time I got to the ending. So it just, and it did too much. It took 10 characters, 10. And what that did, though, is it spread everything thin, because you have Thena, played by Angelina Jolie, and she's going through something really interesting with her mind, that she has too many memories and it's like crushing her. But rather than being able to get the time to understand how the sickness affects her, how it affects her personality, how it affects the team, how it could affect the world, because we have 10 characters, each with their own character arc, it takes hers and it makes it shallow. So we touch on something interesting, and we go, oh, I wonder where that's going to go. Oh, well, apparently nowhere of consequence, because now we got to dive into this person's thing. And then, you know, you have Cersei, and she turns one of the deviants into a tree. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's her power. She touches things and turns it into a different material. Yeah. And everybody goes, whoa, you can do that? I'm like, well, no, duh. I mean, she turned dirt into water. I don't get why couldn't she turn a deviant into a tree? But they talk about it like it's this impossible feat. How did you do that? But they never explain then even how she did it.
Yeah, so their powers are not necessarily explained clearly, like what these characters can do. There's like one character in here who's clearly being interpreted as Superman. Like, he can shoot lasers from his eyes, he can fly. There's even like a reference in the movie where it's like, hey, are you Superman? It's
they even joke calling him Clark Kent. So I mean,
but it's like, it's not really. They actually do that.
Nice.
It's not established whether or not what kind of powers these Eternals have, and that's the confusing part about this movie. And the exact same criticisms that I have with this are the kind of the same criticisms I have with the movie Dune. Eternals would have worked better if it was a television show. Like, what would have happened if this was on Disney Plus and we would have watched this as, like, you know, like we did with WandaVision or Loki?
Oh, yeah.
This would have been a lot better. It would have been a lot different. It would have been a lot more, like, weird, and probably parents would have been a little bit more PO'd, because they're like, what in the world is this? Because there's, like, this movie felt a lot more different than other MCU films. There's, like a lot of history within wars, people killing and slaying each other, taking over free will. But
okay, the free will thing was really interesting. When we got Druid, Like, it was really, and he made the Mayans disappear. You know how the Mayans just disappeared and nobody knows how? So now we see how. But like, so that was cool. But again, because you have 10 characters and you have to get into 10 character arcs as you're meeting all of these characters, this really cool journey that Druig is going through. I can control free will. I could end suffering, pain, and wars. And the fact that the Celestial is telling me not to, can you imagine the guilt that I carry, that I have to watch these people murder each other, knowing that any second I can make it stop? I mean, that is fascinating. That plot by itself is really interesting, but we only touched like the bare, shallow end of it. And I'm just inside screaming, that is so cool. I wish I got that.
Yeah, and the problem with the Eternals is like it's you have these interesting stories, and it kind of, and while I'm wanting to say I want to get to know more about what's going on within while this movie is moving forward, it's really making it hard for me to care about what's happening within the situation. Sometimes when they're wanting me to get sucked back in, they're like, "Hey, let's tell a joke. Let's go ahead and put in some humor here and there." And
they did less of that than your typical MCU movie, but you're right.
They did it. Yeah, they did it less of that.
Like, oh, come on. I was getting into what was happening over here. Now you're joking over here? Come on.
Yeah, so, like, in true transparency, just if anybody's wondering why I'm so quiet, is I haven't seen this movie yet. but we talked before, like, I'm okay with spoilers because I think it might help me get through this movie because I hear it's, well, like Durban said, it can be a little exhausting. So, but I did want to add in, like, just hearing what you guys are saying, it seems like that this concept, like, it should have been a series, like you said, Chandler. But at the same time, it's like, it seems like Marvel tried to make a DC movie,
right?
But
it kind of did.
But sucked at it, or maybe just that formula just doesn't work in general. You know, I mean, maybe I don't know. What I was saying though, it seems like it's kind of a tonal.
Well, it's hard to say because the movie itself is well made. I love the musical score and the sound design. The visuals are excellent, and you could tell in the story there is the potential. Like, you see it. And I think that's part of what's really frustrating about this movie. I mean, for instance, we just talked about Game of Thrones, right? We have Robb Stark and Jon Snow, the two brothers, together again, and they get one scene together. I'm sorry. If I was Marvel, I would be like, people love those two, and it's hilarious they're in the same thing again. We're going to capitalize on that. And they never do.
And then we do have Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman in one show, and not once did we get a Sherlock joke.
No, that was terrible. But it also just makes me sad because in the post-credit scene, Steve, I'll try not to get too spoilerly, but they want to pump up Jon Snow's character, Kit Harington, right? Is that his real name? Mm-hmm. They want to pump it up like some big deal, and this is going to go somewhere big. But he's in so little of the movie that I don't care. Like, I have no emotional attachment to Jon Snow. I have no emotional attachment to his character. I don't even know who he is other than Cersei's current boyfriend. Like, I don't know anything about him beyond that. So why do I care about this post-credit scene and whatever his future is going to be?
Yeah, it's most likely like Dune. Like, if you don't know the comics or don't know the original source material, then it seems like that people are not going to like it. And that's why there are people that are actually for this movie. Like, you know, Matthew Haynes, he discussed why he was like pro for Eternals, or why he actually acknowledged it. He acknowledged that there was definitely problems with it, but he's like, no, I just don't understand why a lot of people are really hating on it when I really enjoyed it. And he talked about how he knew these comic book characters, and it's the same with like Ren Geekness and Zach Pope from Geeks of the Roundtable, their own podcast. Go ahead and check them out. But anyways, they talked about how they've read the comic books and how they enjoyed the characters because they knew the comics, and they enjoyed the movie because of that. So I think it is because we don't know necessarily the knowledge of these characters, and because they did, they were more forgiving for the movie, but because we didn't, we couldn't forgive it.
Which actually, again, is where I was at with Dune. Because I have a history at the 1984 movie, I have a little bit of forgiveness, and I can follow that movie better. Whereas this one, I could see what they like about it. And if you know these characters, I could see why you would really like this movie. There are some really epic things that are done, but not only are we trying to, for someone like me, for someone like Steve, I think someone like you, Chandler, who are cold, who know nothing about these characters, this is
Yeah.
a lot to take in. On top of the fact, it's already a lot to take in when you go with Guardians of the Galaxy and you go all spacey and you get into the space side of it. Like, that's already big. Right now, we're not just going the space side of things. We're going this weird, ethereal Marvel's version of In the Beginning, the philosophy of the heavens and earth. We are getting really ethereal with this movie on top of following 10 characters and all of that stuff. So it was, maybe I would like this better on a second run, but I have no desire to see it again on the big screen. I don't want to pay more money
No,
to
I
see it
don't
again. I'm
want to
going to
see
wait
it
till
again.
Disney Plus. Then I'll see what my second reaction holds for me. But yeah.
Well, and that's an aspect that, like, I just watching the trailer, and I know it's not very fair of us to do this, but just watching the trailer, I got that Dune vibe. I got that vibe of, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to know a lot more than I do to really respect what this movie is, and that's why I've had no interest in seeing it. Um, but I've been wrong before. And you brought up Guardians of the Galaxy as a prime example, something that I'd never heard of, characters I knew nothing about. And when I saw the trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy, I was like, "The heck is this? What is this?
Same.
I was like, this is dumb, Marvel. You're jumping the shark. I'm done."
The
And
same
then
with
and
me and
it ended up
Ant-Man.
being one of my favorites. It ended up being one of my favorite movies, my favorite
Yeah.
MCU movies. But that's because the story was told well. It wasn't like a shh. If you're in the know, you're in the know. No, they gave you a good explanation of what these characters are, who they are, and you saw their arc play out from beginning to end in a way that makes sense. Unlike I know we keep talking about it, but unlike Dune, where like, okay, I definitely need to know more. I need to talk to somebody who knows what's going on, or I guess I need to read a book to understand this. And apparently this is what Eternals sounds like it's doing. I'm gonna feel like, oh man, I wish I really knew about this. Because they're obviously not telling me. So yeah.
And I think it's not just about knowing and understanding the characters. I think it literally is because this movie is so different compared to like other MCU films. Because Marvel usually is aiming their target audience is usually just broad appeal, like people who usually like jokes, funny humor, action, characters that are and their personalities are pretty much likable. And I'm seeing that formula within the Eternals. Like they're trying to insert jokes, they're trying to make characters like be a little witty and have fun personalities here and there. There's also like they're trying to like have some action sequences. There isn't that much action in the Eternals that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
But they tried to insert those type of formulas in there so that people can be like somewhat entertained and watch the movie for some amount of enjoyment. But then you have like this other side where somebody is really trying to make a story here. And I think since it's like a different type of criticism, that story probably doesn't work unless you're able to like create a show.
Yeah. There's something about this that is a bit inaccessible. Like, so to go with what you guys were saying, when I heard about Guardians of the Galaxy talking space raccoon and a talking tree, I thought the same thing, Steve. I was like, they're going to jump the shark. But you see it, and there's something accessible about it. I mean, it's not just the characters, because the characters are great. Chris Pratt is like your friend, and I don't know, it just draws you into the characters. But they also made all that weird, crazy, spacey stuff accessible. And maybe some of it is they embraced how weird it was. They made it fun. And so it kind of pulls you in. There's something about Eternals that's not as accessible. So to people like Matthew V. Haynes, who have read this comic, who know these characters, it's probably more accessible because they've kind of been entrenched in this world for a while. So this movie might feel like more like a reward to them and they can forgive its faults. But I'm going into this cold, and it's a bit more inaccessible to me because they're not having as much fun as they had with Guardians of the Galaxy. They're actually pulling a DC and taking it a bit more seriously. And because they're taking it a bit more seriously, because it's really ethereal and deep and philosophical, and 10 characters who are very different and ethereal and deep and philosophical. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so much to try to comprehend while I'm trying to follow a story.
Well, like Chandler said, if there's if you're going to try to tell a story like that, you should probably stick to that one tone. But what Chandler was saying was, but you have this darker tone that you're trying to stick to, but they're also trying to throw those formulaic, things that have worked before in MCU. Like, oh, don't forget, we're still MCU. Here's
a joke.
Yeah, here's your joke. Here's that one thing you recognize. It seems like maybe they wanted to go the dark, or not the darker, but the more rich storytelling route, and they kind of dropped the ball on which I don't know. It seems like maybe this movie needed maybe not as extensive, but almost like an Infinity War lead up. A few movies beforehand to kind of lead up to where this movie ended up at. Yeah, that's what it seems like to me. Maybe I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but just from what I can gather from the discussion.
Well, it's weird because look at Loki. That's weird and ethereal, right? I mean, they're trying to introduce the multiverse, but it's a series. They were able to take their time with it. They took a familiar character we've come to know and love, Loki, Tom Hiddleston. And so because it had that familiarity to it, it had fun characters, and because it was a series, there was time enough to really dig into what was happening, and we could actually get visual aids to help us see what's going on here. This was not that.
Yeah, this leads me to like a question that I want to ask you guys about like the future of Phase 4. Do you think that this is still going to be like a rocky road, or like the future movies are not necessarily going to be as awesome as we're hoping there to be? Because so far for me, like, it seems like that Marvel isn't necessarily what I would have wanted from the Marvel MCU in general for Phase 4, is that I wanted them to come out of that like cliche Marvel as formula, because when I hear titles like Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings and Eternals, or Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I hear this calling out as, we're going to do something different. We're going to do something that's unique and new, and not stick with like playing it safe like all these other movies that we did within the past. The only time where I've seen like Marvel, even though they're kind of playing it safe with like, inserting humor here and there, but they're still like saying, no, we're going to go for it, was in the show Loki, with that ending and talking about how they're saying Kang the Conqueror is going to come over and like going to cause some like weird stuff with the whole multiverse and stuff like that. But with the movies that I'm seeing here, like, I had a little bit of a problem with Shang-Chi. I didn't necessarily care for that movie that much. I wanted to like it, and there were things in there that I kind of did like, I kind of enjoyed the kung fu style, and I enjoyed some of the visual aspects here and there. But my problem was that with the main character Shang-Chi, I didn't find him to be that interesting, because it was again like that Marvel formula where they were like making him a little funny. He's at a karaoke bar with Aquafina. He's singing songs, and they're being quirky here and there. He likes fast cars, so he's kind of relatable to the broader audiences. But when I hear a title like Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, I'm thinking of like myth. I'm talking about like legendary stories or spirituality, going full deep into that. And movies like, Kung Fu Panda or Ryan the Last Dragon, movies that are like fully in depth to like spirituality and stuff like that, where it can still be pertained within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's sorry about that. But it's also going into a new realm where we're doing something brand new. We're no longer going to like this like safe place where we're like being set in New York, and then we're kind of having like these powers that nobody experienced before, and we're kind of being funny here and there with some action scenes here and there. I wanted like the Phase 4 of MCU to do something like totally different and brand new, and it seems like Eternals and Shang-Chi were trying to do that, but they were still sucked in with that formula. That's the problem that I'm seeing so far with the MCU Phase 4, as far as I'm concerned. Not necessarily with like the shows. I'm enjoying the shows. I love Loki the most. WandaVision was... I enjoyed that show, and I also enjoyed Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but those two shows were also kind of playing it safe, and it was kind of noticeable that they were playing it a little safe beforehand. And even with a show like Hawkeye, I feel like that one is kind of playing it safe a little bit as well. But with Phase 4, like Eternals and Shang-Chi, it seemed like that it had the opportunity to do something like bold and brand new, and it just I don't know. I'm still seeing that formula here and there. But what do you guys think?
So
Well,
to you, it's like they got a foot in each pond here. Like they're trying to stay formulaic and they're trying to do something new, and that's why we're getting this lukewarm feeling.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that, but
Yeah.
I also know, at least what we know from Feige and what they've done with Marvel movies, that I'm not so sure if these are missteps or seeds. Maybe okay, we got the Eternals, we saw it. It didn't get great reviews, but it's going to pay off later. Like they're when they come into the movie, into the future films, then we'll be like, oh yeah, I recognize these guys, and now they're playing into a much bigger story, and we already know who they are. This movie just it's like uh Captain Marvel. Like, let's get this movie so we know who this chick is, so it makes sense that she's in Endgame. Like, maybe that's what they're doing here.
That's true.
I don't know if it's a misstep or a warning of things to come, but I feel like they have something planned out, and they probably just need to get this out so we know what's going on with them.
Yeah,
in the future.
that is true, because Phase 1 was not necessarily masterful. Like the first Captain America, Thor movie, or whether or not you would say that these movies were fantastic or not, they weren't necessarily critically praised by a lot of people, except for probably the first Iron Man movie. We had like the Incredible Hulk, and then there was Thor, and then there's Captain America, and then we got the Avengers film. And between like Iron Man and the Avengers, all of the other movies, they weren't necessarily highly praised. And compared to like all the other movies that we've had, like in Phase 2 and then Phase 3, people enjoy those movies a lot more because they're like, oh, I recognize these characters that were from Phase 1, and they were in a project that I liked a lot more. So maybe it is kind of what you're saying here, Steve, where it's kind of like planting seeds for something that would be better within the future. And that's kind of like how Marvel usually does these things in terms of setting up a story or creating a better story within the future.
Yeah, it's the only thing that makes sense to me. Or if you want to have the less faith route, then they're just they're kind of losing it, and it could go crappy. But the only reason why I don't think it's going to go that route is because of the what's his name, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Oh, that's
these things that are coming out that will seem like they're going to fall right back into what makes MCU movies great. Rather they're playing into the safe algorithms that they use in all their other movies. That's fine, whatever. If it works, it works. But bringing in something askew like Eternals and Shang-Chi, it's the only thing that makes sense that to me. I don't see this being a purposeful misstep. This is a very planned. We know this movie's probably not going to be our greatest one. They probably knew all this before they put it out. Just my opinion. So
I'm going to actually go with your opinion because I have not lost faith in the MCU yet. They have earned the right to take my money. Yes, Eternals is not my favorite. Shang-Chi I thought was fun, but no, it's not epic. So far, I am enjoying the shows better, especially Loki and WandaVision. I like both those shows quite a bit. But there's a lot of stuff I'm looking forward to. Like Blade, I'm going to be very curious to see their version of Blade, and they keep dropping vampire hints. So it's going to be like, okay, I'm curious to see what you're going to do with Blade. I've never liked a Fantastic Four movie yet, but I've always liked the Fantastic Four characters, and now that it's back in the hands of the MCU, I actually cannot wait to see their Fantastic Four reboot and what they're going to do with that. Same with X-Men. So, and Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I mean, they got enough things on the slate that are intriguing and interesting to me. Marvel has earned the right to take my money. So yes, Eternals, not my favorite, but I'm still very optimistic about their future. They got a lot of good stuff there on the plan, and I'm going to agree with Steve that I think it's going to be seeds that are going to pay off. I mean, Thor: The Dark World. Would any of us say that's a great movie? Probably not.
No.
But it has some really good seeds in it that pay off, especially by the time you get to Endgame. So, I think I don't hate Thor: The Dark World like everybody else. I think it's bland and vanilla, but I have fun with it. But I'm hoping that's what Eternals will be for me. I hope it's my new Thor: The Dark World that is not my favorite, but is laying a good foundation for something great that's coming.
Yeah, and that's a Thor: The Dark World is a perfect example. Whether it was premeditated or not, but it's a great example of, when we watched Endgame, I went back to watch Thor: The Dark World because I kind of like blanked it out of my mind. Like I watched it and I'm like, I don't really remember anything about this dumb movie. But then when Endgame came out, I was like, oh, let's go back and rewatch it. And then rewatching it, I'm like, oh man, I know how that's going to pay off in the future movies. It made me enjoy it a lot more. So yeah,
That's the same thing that happened to my friend.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
he did. He's now saying that like Thor: The Dark World is actually an underrated movie, as a matter of fact, because of what happened within in Endgame.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I wouldn't disagree with him. Yeah, but it's still on the low end of the totem pole there. But in my opinion, but it definitely has resurrected as a more meaningful movie as the time has passed. So
there's more forgiveness to that movie than we used to have, I guess.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. And now I'm actually persuaded, to be honest. I used to have doubts, but Steve, you actually persuaded me. So good job, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay. So, all right. So now we're going to go into like the final topic, which is like the overrated movie and an underrated pick. I think like we'll start with underrated movies because I don't want to start off with overrated. I guess like we'll just leave that with the last one.
Yeah, I'm still deciding how much I want to piss you guys off with my overrated movie. So
I can't wait.
I know what movie I could be able to give you guys that would make you upset, but I'm not gonna
a movie.
I'm not gonna pick that movie. I'm not gonna pick that movie. I'm gonna save it later. All right, but I think I do know. I don't know if you guys will have an effect on what I would be able to say.
You guys will be impacted by one of the ones I have, so I don't know if I'll do it because I always use it to divide everybody. It's
fine.
Thing.
That's fine. If people have a problem with it, it doesn't matter. What's important is that we have civil discussions. If we don't have a problem with it, and we know we can be sarcastic with our humor.
Oh yeah.
So if we don't have a problem with it, it doesn't matter what the comment section says. So
that's right.
Let's just start off with underrated opinions, and I'll start off with Durban. What's your underrated movie that you would say doesn't necessarily deserve hate that much?
Well, okay, so I'm going to stay in the realm of the MCU, and I think an underrated movie that doesn't deserve the hate that it gets is The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. I feel like a lot of people are more disappointed with that movie than they should be. And maybe it's because I saw that Ang Lee Hulk movie and thought that was the worst thing ever. And then when Incredible Hulk came out, I only saw it because I was bored and I had nothing better to do, and I was incredibly surprised at how good it was. But I really like The Incredible Hulk. I love the tone. If you want to talk about breaking the MCU formula, before there was an established MCU formula, The Incredible Hulk broke it. It's darker, it's grittier, it kind of follows that pattern of more of a DC film, and it takes itself a little bit more seriously. I actually even like the Hulk design. So when he hulks out and he's the Hulk, I love that design. So overall, I really like The Incredible Hulk. I love the story that it tells. I love that it's not quite an origin story, but it kind of is. I don't know. I just love that movie. I don't know why that movie underperformed. I don't know why it gets some of the dislikes that it gets.
I'm with you, Durban.
Yeah. And I'm with you. Some of my friends, they say ignore that when you watch the MCU. I'm like, why would you ignore that? It's a really good movie.
They don't ignore it. They don't ignore that.
Yeah.
It's part of the MCU. It's part. But I agree with you that it is somehow just completely misinterpreted. When people talk about it, they're like, "Oh my God, what a crap show of a movie!" And I'm like, "Wait, did we watch the same movie?" Because visually it was great, the story was well done. Edward Norton was a wonderful Bruce Banner, I thought.
Oh,
I really enjoyed his take on it, and I watched that movie. God, I don't know how many times when it first came out. I just obsessed over it. It was so good. And I'm glad it still technically exists, but like now it's just weird, same Hulk, completely different design. Got it.
Yeah. Different design, different actor, whatever.
But I do agree with you, man. That is a very good underrated movie.
I don't think it deserves the hate that it has been, or I guess like the cynical viewpoint of The Incredible Hulk. I don't think it's like that great of a movie, though. I do think that it has certain flaws, but I like the opening sequence of The Incredible Hulk because it's putting us in a different direction where he's trying to control his anger. He's in this whole new location. And seeing this type of aspect with the Incredible Hulk was very fascinating to me. But when it came on to like the other aspects, like the military, weapons, and all this other stuff, it got a little generic on my part, and I wasn't as interested in it. I really enjoyed Edward Norton's role in the film. I thought that he did a great job, and I kind of missed him when I saw the Avengers movie, and I was like, oh, it's not Edward Norton, it's actually Mark Ruffalo. Yeah, but Mark Ruffalo was a good replacement.
I love it. But yeah, I felt the same thing, Chandler. I really did.
Well, Edward Norton did that to himself.
Yeah, that's his own fault.
yeah, he took himself out of that one because he loves to have obsessive control over movies that aren't technically his. So
yeah, but I don't know. I guess like the Incredible Hulk for me was not that fascinating because these stories are stories that, in terms of like military weapons and all this other stuff, I've seen it before. But I like this undercover theme that this movie is going for, and I really like the opening, and I also love the ending sequence when you see Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, and it's setting up for the Avengers movie. That was like a very big pivotal moment when I saw that for the very first time. I was like, oh, it's Tony Stark!
Yeah. Well, all those little connections, right? So some of the weapons they use against the Hulk say Stark Industries on them. You have the SHIELD database featured in there. And so I remember when I saw this and I went, wow. Because, that's a new idea in cinema, right? To connect different superheroes together. And so here is SHIELD. Here is Stark Industries.
Wait, they had the. I never caught the SHIELD database thing. Did it say SHIELD? Did it spell out SHIELD? Those sons of. Okay.
Yeah. The SHIELD logo and everything. So like they had SHIELD, they had Stark, they had.
Oh wait, this movie technically takes place after the first Iron Man, doesn't it?
Yes, it takes place.
Never mind.
Actually, timeline very interesting. The Incredible Hulk, Thor, and Iron Man 2 take place in the same week. So they call it Nick Fury's incredibly busy week or really bad week or something. Like it has even a nickname. So you can look that up.
Nice.
It's really interesting in the timeline because all three of these movies happen in the exact same week.
Okay, the reason why I almost got not upset there, but just I felt like I got catfish was because I just remember them not coming up with the acronym SHIELD yet. And Iron Man. Then I remembered. Oh wait, this is after Iron Man. So never mind. Okay, got it.
And technically, it's after Iron Man 2 because in Iron Man 2 is when Tony Stark is brought on as the consultant, but not an Avenger. And when he shows up in the bar, he's a consultant, and that's the only way he would show up in the bar is after Iron Man 2.
Wow. Yeah, they give him the Anakin Skywalker treatment.
Dang, I wish I would have known that before I did that whole chronological order video I did with the MCU. That would have been so fascinating to go ahead and have that in input. But that was a good pick, Durban. I like that one. Steve, what's your underrated pick?
Okay, well, when you say underrated, are we talking about movies that people don't like and that I happen to like, or are we just talking about a movie that I don't think gets enough recognition?
It could be either one of those things. If you have one where people dislike it, but you like it, or if you have a movie that's like not necessarily shown to a lot of people, but you think deserves more attention.
My favorite movie of all time is a very underrated movie. It's a Tim Burton film. It's called Ed Wood. It's a wonderful biopic about Edward D. Wood Jr., the worst director of all time. This movie, it's shot very well. It's shot in that 50 styles, scientific thriller sort of manner, suspension of disbelief. All the characters are just overacting, and it fits perfectly. Not just that, but like the story being told is something I really connect to. Not the cross-dressing part. I have to defend myself on that. The part where Ed Wood just being a guy, he's in his 30s and like he feels like time is just passing by and he's never gonna make it, and then it ends up being a triumphant story. Ironically, a triumphant story because it is a story about a man of the worst director of all time. But his like blind optimism is just so powerful to me. It's just a movie that resonates with me, and it will always end up as my number one favorite movie of all time.
I haven't seen the movie, but I have heard of it, and I do know that this was like when Johnny Depp was at his prime when he was starring in this film.
I think it's also like I don't know about his prime. He was getting there because it was like 92 when this movie came out, or maybe 94. I can't remember. So he was getting to prime, but yeah, it was. Yeah, and it didn't fall into the classic Tim Burton formula. It was
Yeah.
when you watch it, you don't see it as a Tim Burton, type of movie. It's its own little thing. And it really got me interested in Bela Lugosi movies because the movie really enhances the last years of Bela Lugosi's life. And if you don't know who Bela Lugosi is, he was the original person to play Dracula. And I'm going to drink your blood, like 1938 or 1 or 2, whenever that movie came out. And then so I started following all of his monster movies, and it really dove me deep into scientific thrillers. And it really just opened my eyes to a whole different realm of movies. That's one of the many reasons why it's one of my favorites. Have you seen that movie, Durban?
Yeah, once. It's been a long time, so I don't remember a ton of it, but I remember liking it when I watched it. It is a good movie.
Yeah. But
I think it kind of reminds me of the Disaster Artist. It's similar for me to that. Like, if you guys don't know, do you guys know what the Disaster Artist is?
Yes.
I've heard of it.
I don't know it, but I do know what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so Steve, the Disaster Artist is, I don't know if I could call it like a biopic, but it's definitely based on a book that's about a guy called Tommy Wiseau who created a horrible movie called The Room. It's being criticized or it's being known as a movie that's so bad that it's hilarious. That's where that term definition came from when watching like bad movies that are like so funny that you had to get a group of friends and just laugh at its absurdity. It's by a director named Tommy Wiseau, and his personality is just unlike anything other. But when he goes over and directs his first time ever director debuted film, The Room, he has this like inspiration and optimism of saying like, hey, why do we need to do another take? It's so good. Let's just go ahead and move on to the next one.
Yeah, that's exactly what Ed Wood is. It's the same sort of concept. There's actually one scene in that movie where he says Ed Wood does that entire thing. Like, well, don't you want a second take? He's like, for what? It was perfect.
Yeah.
And Ed Wood was given the title worst director of all time because of his unknowingly huge successful movie Plan 9 from Outer Space. It was his only mainstream hit, and it was such a hit, but go back and you watch it and you're like, God, this movie was terribly made. It was just one of those weird things, but Ed Wood got to where he wanted. That's all he wanted. He just wanted one great movie, and he got it. And I love that triumphant story of his.
Yeah. Tommy Wiseau, I don't know if his character is the same as Ed Wood because the dude is nuts if you actually read the book or see his personality in real life. But it's kind of like the same feeling of like, making movies. That's kind of the same vibe that I am gathering in terms of like understanding the personality of Tommy Wiseau directing the movie and Ed Wood directing his own movie. So that's actually a good pick.
Yeah, give it a shot, man. I would love to see your interpretation of it.
I would definitely love to see that movie because I don't know about you guys, but I'm a sucker for Tim Burton, and I love seeing his movies. So seeing this one would definitely be fascinating to me.
Awesome.
Okay, so my pick is going to be Rocky 3. I am a huge fan of the Rocky franchise, and I don't think Rocky 3 gets enough love as it usually does. A lot of people like to go with...
No, that's 4.
No, that's 4. I was going to say that Rocky 4 usually gets a lot of the love for all of its absurdity and like Drago and all this other stuff that it is, like cheesy 80s montage. It's a silly movie, and I enjoy that movie for it, but what makes me loved Rocky from the beginning was Rocky 3. Seeing Mr. T going up as Clubber Lang and fighting against Sylvester Stallone. Also seeing Hulk Hogan at the beginning of the movie and his opponent facing off against Sylvester Stallone. I love this story arc. I love the story arc with Rocky and actually fighting alongside Creed for the very first time because they used to be on opposing sides, and seeing that for the first time ever when he used to be his enemy, that's what made me fall in love with Creed a lot more often, because when I was young and I used to watch Rocky, I was like, Creed, screw you, dude. Because he usually wins, he's kind of like this show off. But seeing him actually being on his side, even though it's for like a little bit of a selfish reason, it's just there's something heartwarming about that, and I really enjoyed Rocky 3. I don't think it gets a lot of the love that it should deserve because it's like the most entertaining for me seeing Rocky using the exact same fighting moves as Apollo Creed. That was awesome to look at. Seeing Mick die for the first time, that was heartbreaking for me. I thought that was very emotional. I like seeing this redemption of like Rocky now getting on the side of being cocky and having to like pin down his pride and actually become a lot more humble, but actually overcoming it and being stronger in like a symbolic and metaphorical sense where he literally becomes a lot more stronger by stopping his pride. And that's what I like about this story. And I think Rocky 3 is definitely one that I would put over Rocky 4 or probably like a lot of other Rocky movies. And yeah, I just love this movie.
Well, it seems like I don't remember, like, I know I've seen it a few times, but I can't quite grasp onto the story, right now. I'd have to give it a rewatch because it's been so long since I've seen it. But, just from what you're saying, it sounds a lot like they took the elements of Rocky 1 and put them back into Rocky 3. Because the one thing I loved about the first Rocky was he was humble.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be this big, famous boxer. He liked where he was, and it sounds like they kind of brought him back to that, put him back in his place. So I could see why that it's a good evolution.
Yeah. His worst fear came true a little bit. Unconsciously, he didn't think that was going to happen, but eventually he did. That's why he was so angry and so afraid when he was in that montage with Creed, and that's why I really like Rocky 3. And Durban, have you seen Rocky 3?
I know I've seen the first 4, and I remember Mr. T. I just can't, like Steve, I can't grasp a hold of the story, so I'd have to go back and watch it. But your description makes me want to go back and watch it because, I mean, that's what I love about Iron Man and Doctor Strange. They're humbling and losing their pride and humbling themselves, and I think that's a very interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole Rocky series is I'm a huge fan of it. Anytime a new Rocky movie comes out, like I'm just part of it. Even,
absolutely.
Like, I mean, and I love how they took the evolution of it and took it to bringing the Creed name back, and like I thought that was a very intelligent way to continue this Rocky saga. Like Sylvester Stallone has made some really good directional steps with this film. So like I'm but yeah, I'd love to watch Rocky 3. Let's have a watch party. Let's watch Rocky 3.
I'm down.
Yeah, and that while we do it, we could do Man of Steel as well.
Oh
yeah,
Chandler, I'd love to watch.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with watching the greatest movie ever made. I totally agree with you guys.
I think you're misinterpreting that with Donner Cut, to be honest.
Dude, Donner, never heard of her.
Her?
I'm sorry. I'm not throwing diss at Donner. I was just being silly.
Oh, man. But yeah, let's go ahead and go over towards the overrated picks now. So, Durban, I'm curious what your pick for an overrated movie is.
Okay, I've got two. Option A, you could go with option A, and I've only seen it once. I have no desire to see it again, but I can't go into detail about it because I've only seen it the one time, and I've purposely forgotten it out of my head. So we could go with that, and that one will be extremely divisive. Or we could go with option B, which is only very divisive, but I could go into detail about it. So what do you want, A or B?
Let's do both. I got two as well, man.
All right.
Yeah, let's do both.
Okay.
So what?
One of the most overrated movies of all time is Pulp Fiction. I think anything Tarantino is overrated. I don't think that dude can write. I think people praise it because they think he's being risky because he writes like an immature, filthy 13-year-old. And I think people dig it and they think it's so cool. All his dialogue is ways of putting the F word and all these other words together in the most creative ways possible. I'm just like, this guy ain't a good writer. He's hiding behind being vulgar. And everybody is writing it off as poetic art. And Pulp Fiction is a string of stories that I don't get. It wasn't entertaining. It was stupid from the very beginning to the very end. I hold no love for that movie. I don't understand why it's a classic. And I don't get even remotely what people enjoy about Pulp Fiction.
When's the last, when did you watch it?
I was in college. Okay. One of my friends made me watch it. It was terrible.
The first time I watched Pulp Fiction, I thought the same exact thing. I was like, what is this stupid movie? What's going on here? I thought that guy was dead. No, he's not dead. What's going on here? It wasn't until probably about 6 years ago I rewatched it, and then like it all connected, and I fell in love with this movie. Now it's one of those movies I'll watch anytime, and I totally, absolutely like it. Now I'm not a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. You know, I don't like Jackie Brown. I don't like the other one. I can't remember what the other one that's kind of like Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs. That's it. But I do like some other projects. But Pulp Fiction is a fun movie. It's fun once I understood what was going on. You know, when I understood what was going on and I grabbed a part of a hold of the dialogue, it's a really fun movie for me. But I could definitely see why you would think that, because I thought that same way for a very long time.
Yeah.
So,
I can understand that too, Durbin. But the first time I did watch it, I honestly enjoyed it. I didn't hate it. I was saying to myself, okay, this is weird. I haven't necessarily seen it unlike any of the other movies that I haven't necessarily watched, but Pulp Fiction was like the first Tarantino movie I've ever experienced. So to see this type of like writing and dialogue and how they're able to talk, and just seeing this as like characters being awkward, which kind of initially is like dark humor, I guess, within Tarantino's eyes, where he usually make things that are dark but kind of funny because they're awkward in certain places. I thought it was unique. I thought it was like a unique film where it was like going out of like just, I guess, like in terms of having a timeline, it was like going out of order, going to different specific places, being weird and all that stuff. I thought it was a fascinating look of how to create movies, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I don't necessarily care to go back and see it again, because it's some of it is a little too much for me. But at other parts where I do like it for that, I thought for what the movie was, it was pretty much enjoyable.
Now to walk this back, because I know the hate's coming. I think my first Tarantino movie I ever saw was Kill Bill. And both Volume 1 and 2, I don't love them, but I like them. And I think the reason I like them is because they're story-driven. So there's a story, and I'm following a story. And I love story-driven things. And Pulp Fiction does not seem very story-driven. It's dialogue-driven. No. It's all about how these characters talk and the types of words they use. It's all about these characters, and it's very... I don't like it's the same thing with Lost in Translation. Like, I got lost in the translation of that film. I don't know why people like it, but it's because, again, it's character driven, it's dialogue driven. I want a story. That's why I'm here to see a movie. I'm not here to watch people randomly walk and talk and shoot the breeze about crap I don't care about. I want a story where I'm seeing a character arc and I'm seeing these characters grow and change through this story. And so I think part of my problem with Tarantino is that's where I struggle with that. I want a good story. I don't want characters just in random situations talking about it.
See, I think that's very curious because, again, understanding your aspect of that, but me seeing the movie as I see it now, it actually is very story driven. Because
I've only seen it the one time.
Because
it might not have clicked, but yeah,
it didn't click with me the first time either. But the multiple stories going on actually very much so intertwine with each other into a much larger story. It's just a very unique way of telling it,
right?
Yeah, you know, and they do some little time jumps here and there, but it kind of makes sense. Like this character that you see, you end in this movie watching this character, you know, grow from here to here, but like somewhere in the middle of it, you also see him get killed and blown away. Like, okay, well, that's how this guy just randomly dies. But like, then he comes back in a slightly different timeline, you know, and you get to see like his redemption story. It's such a, it's complex, but that's what I ended up
so I might have missed that. Like the first time I watched it, let me just go back in time. I was in college. It was my friend who loves weird, artsy-fartsy indie films, and we watched this film out of this French trilogy called Bleu, Blanc, Blanc, whatever. I don't know. It was one of the stupidest things I'd ever seen, and I had come out of complete and utter boredom. Like, I have never sat through these movies that are so long, 3 back-to-back, and then to go from that into Pulp Fiction. So I might have been at this point where, like you said, Steve, just in your initial reaction, you didn't catch that overarching story, right? So here I am coming out of already indie stuff I was not enjoying, and then I'm going into this. So I think I might have been mentally exhausted. So I'm big enough man to say maybe it deserves a second viewing from me,
Yeah,
and I might
absolutely.
appreciate it marginally better, but
Yeah,
it
maybe.
might still not going to be a favorite.
And just a little side note with this movie, the dialogue itself is like almost 50% of the fun of this movie, because
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
the dialogue is not just like, the most creative ways to put the F word together. It's very unique, and they're telling almost little mini stories in their dialogue. It's just random interactions, but like what the words that they're saying is just, I don't know. It pulls you into this little rabbit hole that they're telling.
Yeah. See,
It,
I gave the Tarantino dialogue another shot.
Mhm.
I went and saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I went, well, no more shots from me, Tarantino. My gosh, that movie is so long and so boring.
I think that's the fascinating of why Tarantino is divisive, though. He is more so on like wanting to create dialogue as the main purpose of entertainment. Just for like, that's the reason why I do enjoy Pulp Fiction. Like, if I didn't necessarily look at the movie in general and I was just listening to it on my phone, then I would still be just as entertained because of what they're saying.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
What's the other one, Durbin?
Yeah, I was about to ask, what's the second movie?
Oh man, I cannot wait to see the comment section. The other one is Thor Ragnarok.
Oh yeah,
I agree with that.
And let me say this: I like Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok is not like Tarantino for me. I enjoy Thor Ragnarok. If I want something fun, hilarious, and mindless, the best comedies nowadays are superhero films because nobody else knows how to make a freaking comedy. So Ant-Man and stuff like that are great comedies. Anyway, so I don't hate Thor Ragnarok. But what I very much dislike about it is there is no balance because Thor's dad dies. So here's a slapstick joke. All of Thor's best friends died. So here's another slapstick joke. Thor has to blow up his entire home country. But man, isn't that hilarious? And so it's just like these heavy plot points are happening and they're covering it up, and not just slapstick, but like extreme slapstick. So if you go to Infinity War, this is what I'm talking about. Put Thor and Rocket together, and it's freaking hilarious. They bring out the funniest sides of each. But then you also have this moment where they're sitting there talking about all that Thor has been through, all the people that he's lost, and then you feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. But you also don't sit in that, right? So it doesn't sit long enough that it becomes this depressing factor, because you do go back into the comedy and the fun between Thor and Rocket. But that's what I'm talking about. There was a balance. We got the best of comedic Chris Hemsworth and Thor and all the hilarity that he could possibly be, as well as feeling the real weight of the story and what's going on. That's what Ragnarok did not have. There was no weight to the story because they lean so heavy on the slapstick that it's like, all right, cool. He lost an eye. That's hilarious.
Well, 2 points here that I derive from what you just said was, number one, I think Thor Ragnarok needed to happen because we already had heavy, deep Thor, and it just quite wasn't working yet, you know, and at least for me. And so this Thor being put into this light really just kind of like made up for, kind of the slower paced Thor, like made him cool again. I know that term was being thrown around a lot. But also I do disagree with you on one aspect, and that is when moving forward, I think him not acknowledging everything that's happening in that movie is what propels his character forward in the rest of the films. That's why one of the many reasons why we get depressed, Thorbowski, in Endgame.
Yep. That's a really good point. And there is something to be said for that he deflects through his humor.
Yeah.
So it still doesn't take away that I feel like Ragnarok is not very balanced, but you do make a very solid point, Steve, about the nature of us humans, how we can deflect that way.
Yeah.
That's the problem with me with Thor Ragnarok as well. Like, there is a way of you to not tell a story correctly by, like, say, Thor the Dark World, That's a movie that was a lot more serious and took in the aspects of like, Asgard and Thor, like the journey of the characters and their story arcs, and wanted to take it in a more serious tone, but that didn't necessarily work. So Thor Ragnarok decided to transfer it over and decided to be a more lighthearted side, and that clearly won over a lot more people. But I didn't feel like that one worked either, because both sides of them have a problem at creating an equal balance of, like, say, interest in the story and a balance within the theme that they're going with, in order for me to be captivated and also for me to, like, really gravitate to these characters. And I guess, like, with Thor Ragnarok, as much as I like to go back and if I go back and watch this movie again and see the humor, I think that I am a little bit more sucked into it and do laugh at the jokes a little bit more than I used to with my first going experience. But it still is an issue with me a little bit when it does come to the serious aspects of it. Like, hey, we just told a joke, now you're going to have to be serious. I feel like there was a better balance of that when it came to Infinity War than there was within Thor Ragnarok.
Right.
Yeah, Infinity War was a very well-balanced movie. Balanced, as all things should be.
Oh my gosh, I never made that connection. And all the times that I said Infinity War was more balanced, I never put that together. That is the best. Anyway, now that I feel like I've made all the audience and all the world mad, and they now think I'm an illegitimate movie reviewer because I don't like Tarantino, Steve, let's talk to you.
I am an illegitimate movie reviewer. No, in my channel, I just talk about movies. I just like talking about them. I don't dive deep into theatrical analysis like Durban does. I just literally go and see a movie and discuss it from just an average moviegoer perspective. At least that's what I think.
Same. That's kind of what I am.
Now, my first pick of most overrated, a major overrated movie is Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I never saw that, actually.
Yeah, right.
I don't think I've seen it before, but I know Tim Curry.
Well, everybody seems to love it, and I don't get it. I didn't see it for a long time. People, oh my God, you have to see this movie. You have to see this movie. You have to see this movie. I saw it, and I'm like, no, this movie looks just as crappy as I thought it would be. I also don't like musicals, so that I had that going for me as well. But and since you guys don't know much about it, I'm just going to move on to my second pick here. Lord of the Rings.
Oh
no! You've only seen Fellowship, and barely, because you had my commentary the whole time.
Yeah, I didn't say the trilogy. I just said Lord of the Rings. The one I watched before twice, technically, once with you, Durban. So like, it's no different than you saying Pulp Fiction, man. Come on.
Yeah, it's true. It's no different than you saying Pulp Fiction. Go ahead. Yeah.
It has more. It's more of a solid point because I watched it with you while you gave commentary of why I should love this movie. And that's
a dedicated fan if I ever heard one.
Well, it was a whole segment that I wanted to do on my channel called Change My Mind. Unfortunately, we did it very complex, and we didn't do it live stream the way we should have done it. Maybe we can try that again.
Actually, we should try that again now that we got StreamYard. We didn't have that when we first tried this. So.
No, we
do that with me.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
But like it was a pre-recorded thing, and it just didn't work out, so the video never got put out. But Durban sat there through the whole thing and tried to explain to me, this is what's going on, this is the deal, and I'm just like, I don't care about any of this. But that's me. I don't like the old world type of fantastical type of movies. Like it's not my thing. But yeah, when people talk about it, they freaking love Lord of the Rings, and it's like when people talk about football, I'm just over here not giving a crap about any of it at all. Thanks. I don't know if you're a sports fan, but
no, I'm not.
Okay, thank you. I'm in good company then. Cause
yes, you are.
When you're around the guys and they're like, oh yeah, football, and I'm over here just like
every Ohio State Michigan game. Steve, do you like me have to put on the fake game face and pretend to care?
No,
it's awful.
No, I do not do that. I'm like, I'll just say go blue just to piss off Ohio State people, and then I'll say go OSU just to piss off the Michigan people, just because I just like to see them all get riled up for no reason. But
that's me with my brothers when they talk about sports all around. I mean, they're happy that Atlanta Braves won the championship of baseball, and I'm like, cool. I live in Atlanta. I don't care.
Right. Yeah. So that's how I feel when people talk about Lord of the Rings and how excited they are. Harry Potter is very close to this sort of thing as well. Just another series. I've enjoyed Harry Potter movies more than Lord of the Rings. But
well, it's modern day. It's not super high fantasy, whereas Lord of the Rings,
it's not
high fantasy. So
yeah. It's just okay. Yeah, that movie exists. It looks good, but I'm just not. I just don't get drawn into it at all.
Steve, you drew a very good comparison that I can connect with. Like for me, I don't connect to Tarantino because I don't connect to dialogue driven. I connect to story driven. You're not connecting to Lord of the Rings because it's high fantasy. You want something that you can connect with more. I disagree with your opinion, but I actually completely understand what it is you don't like about it.
Yeah.
That's like with me with Martin Scorsese. I can understand why people love his movies. I don't really care for them that much, though. I don't really care to see them.
So, Chandler, what's yours? What's your overrated pick?
Okay, so I have two as well. I can go off that's a horror movie, or ironically enough, I could go one that's a Tarantino movie.
Oh boy! Oh man!
All right, yeah. Choose which one you want to do.
Right? Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll save the Tarantino for last, but I'll go with the horror movie. My overrated horror movie is the very first It movie. I just
that.
With Tim Curry.
Yeah.
No, not with Tim Curry. No, not with Tim Curry. It's actually the one, the newly released 2017 movie. The other one was the miniseries. I think that's what was confusing about it.
Okay.
But yeah, the 2017 It movie. I watched it like twice, and the first time I watched it, it was in movie theater, and I was like, well, these things are. It's kind of scary here and there, but I'm just like I'm having problems getting drawn into the movie and. Like a lot of people loved it, and when It Chapter 2 was out, I was like, okay, I'll watch the first movie again just to see if I can like enjoy the movie a lot better. And I still had the same issues with this one. And it's not like I get the kind of story that they're doing here, and it's an interesting story where, this clown is only attacking children, but these adults can't necessarily see it, and it's only the kids pertaining to it it's only affecting the kids, and it doesn't have any effect on the adults. And there's like this deep story that's going on with these children, whether it's like, they're inserting humor or they're inserting like a dark past story that's going on with them. And Stephen King's stories usually have these dark psychological stories to them that are usually fascinating, and I get hooked whenever I watch them. But when I watch it, the very first It movie, the psychological elements of it were not grabbing me because I'm seeing like this, again, kind of like Thor Ragnarok, this imbalance of like both darkness, and then there's dark humor, and then there's just straight up goofy comedy, and then there's like this actually being a scary movie in terms of like jump scares, and then there's the psychological thriller where they're trying to be a psychological thriller. And I was more fascinated to see like what's the psychological thriller of this movie, because that's kind of what scares me the most when watching a scary movie in general, or listening to like a Stephen King story. But when I watched this movie, I was just saying to myself, I'm not into it because there's like these CGI effect characters just like coming in and trying to do spooky stuff, and then there's this like forced in 80s humor, and then there's this other aspect where it's actually trying to be a psychological thriller, and I'm like, okay, what's this side of the story? And then they're kind of just like going off from it, and then they're just like, there's like so many other characters that they have in here where it looked like they wanted to touch upon their stories and then not touch upon their stories, and then they're focusing on like other aspects of stuff that's going on in here. And I give it credit that it looks nice, it is scary, sometimes it can be funny, and I think that the cast in here is done very good. I just, as a whole, I just found it to be unbalanced, and I couldn't find myself getting invested into it. I didn't think it was like that scary or that much of a thriller. I didn't find it to be that fascinating. I don't know what my deal was, but It Chapter 2 was way worse, in my opinion. And it kind of made me like the first movie a little bit more, but
wow.
I just don't...
If this tells you something, I saw both of those movies. I think I liked them a little bit better than you did, but not by much. but I'm going, crap, I can't even remember what happened.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually
it's
in
kind
the
of
same
just in
boat.
and
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I do like the story it's telling, and both collectively the first and second movie. Um, but yeah, I'm not, and I'm a horror fan. And I do like some of the aspects. I think it does have a very creepy tone. I think the Pennywise is much creepier than the Tim Curry version. I never got behind the Tim Curry
Yeah.
version. I wasn't like, oh my god, Tim Curry is so scary. I'm like,
I never saw that version.
No, I saw it.
I just never got behind it. And I grew up right in the era where that movie was like when the miniseries came out, and I just didn't find it scary. I just didn't see what was so scary about the clown. This one I can
Well,
totally see.
you
He's
were
terrifying.
sneaking Freddy 3 in the middle of the night, apparently. So of course you're not
Yeah.
going to find it scary.
Fair. My sensitivity may have been a little skewed. Yeah, that's a very valid point. But when it came to the reboot of it or remake of it, I like Durban. Like I'm sitting here trying to think about it, and I really don't remember much of the movie. It's not memorable, and I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever seen the second one. Or maybe just like a part of it. I don't know. I can't remember.
It's
You know,
funny. I
they haven't
remember
stuck with
watching
me.
them, and I did a theological analysis on the two parts. I can't even remember what I said in my theological analysis. That's where I'm at.
Isn't it an oddity for what we do sometimes? Like sometimes
Yeah.
I have to ask Seth. I'm like, did I
Yeah.
do a review for this movie? Oh yeah, that's right. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it, man. That's a that
And maybe-
is- that first one.
Maybe
was
it's because like
overrated.
I'm not a huge horror fan. I don't know.
Might have
I
something to
guess
do with it.
it's only like I can get invested in a horror film if there is something very. I guess maybe it's not even a horror aspect. Maybe it's the psychological thriller that I'm more invested in rather than like the jump scare aspect. When I saw like the psychological thriller that's kind of in the first It movie, I'm like, okay, maybe this can be fascinating. It could lead into something that's like really traumatizing. But then when it came to like all these goofy jump scares, I'm like, it looks scary. It's definitely scarier than the miniseries, but it's just I'm not getting into it. I just don't find it to be that fascinating.
You know, there's a movie that I like that I think is underrated, and it's called Sphere with Dustin Hoffman, Samuel L. Jackson, and what I liked about that movie is it was more psychological than anything else. There was no actual monster that they were running from, and it was their worst nightmares that would get manifested into reality if they thought about it for even a second. And so, while
Was that underwater?
yeah.
Okay.
At the bottom of the ocean, alien spaceship, a sphere
Yeah.
that grants them this ability to manifest what they are thinking. And so, like, what I like about that movie that apparently nobody else does is there is no monster. It's all about your imagination. And I think that's what I liked about the movie Signs until you get to the very end where you don't see the aliens, but you hear the noises they make and the scratches. So it's very psychological. And so I think I could agree with you on that, Chandler. Like, anytime the clown was overly CG and trying to do something over the top, it's like, okay, that is creepy looking, but it's not freaking me out. Whereas when he's talking to that kid in the sewer and he has those blank stares on his face, it's like he just forgets the conversation he's having and just kind of stares blankly and stuff. That's kind of a weird psychological moment where you're like, what the crap is this guy thinking? And so,
Yeah, I want to bring in like a perfect example about horror movies that you can insert ghosts and you can make them scary, but what does matter is actually the psychological analysis of the story that makes it scary for me. And I don't know if you guys ever seen the show, but it's called The Haunting of Hill House. It's on Netflix.
seen it.
Yeah, I watched the first season. Yeah.
Yeah, that show was a perfect balance of me of getting like, scary ghost elements and having like things in here that are pretty creepy, but what is mostly scary is the story, the psychological thriller aspect. This felt like more of a Stephen King movie, even though it's not necessarily by Stephen King, but it felt like that, and it felt like more of that Stephen King vibe that was so interesting to me without it actually being a Stephen King movie. And I think like Mike Flanagan is definitely, because he's the one that directed that show, he's pretty much the best example to show how a Stephen King movie or Stephen King story can be adapted, because he hasn't necessarily done a bad one. He's done by far the best two Stephen King movies that are supposed to be a horror thriller. He's done Gerald's Game and he's done Doctor Sleep, and I thought both of those movies were fantastic.
Yeah, I like I didn't see Gerald's Game, but I did like Doctor Sleep.
Gerald's Game is definitely a psychological movie for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And that's why I like that one. But yeah, that's my opinion on the first It movie, and now I'm going to go over towards the Tarantino one. And I don't know your guys' knowledge on how much Tarantino you have seen, but I'm pretty sure if you have seen a lot of it, this might break some people. An overrated movie, in my opinion, is Inglourious Basterds.
I did not see that one, actually.
I don't like that movie. So you're in good company.
Hey, nice.
I watched it, and I'm like, just like Lord of the Rings. Sorry, guys. But like, I was just watching it, and I'm like, why? Why is this on film?
This is the thing that got me the most upset. Like, when I saw the synopsis of it, I saw that this was supposed to be like Brad Pitt. He's supposed to be a person that gathers up a bunch of Jews and kills Nazis. That's the fun aspect, to see like Tarantino with this type of goofy dialogue and dark humor, to see this type of story being put in full front. I was actually excited to see this. And then what does the movie do? It's like, let's put that to the side and focus on a spy. And then focus on like this other girl that happens to be in a theater and is like being interrogated by this other Nazi.
In Hollywood for me. Why did he make a movie about people talking for so dang long when the real story is Leonardo DiCaprio going into Italy, falling in love, and revitalizing his career with spaghetti westerns? What they covered in 2 seconds of narration was a way better plot than the whole dang movie put together. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unpopular opinion, I like Once Upon a Time more than Inglourious Basterds, honestly. But that's beside the point. I didn't like that this movie had like a way better and more interesting and fun storyline that legit, like Brad Pitt, I kind of liked the kind of character that he was in this movie. It was funny, it was weird, and I was like, oh man, I wanted to see this throughout the whole entire film. And I guess the ending was like, I guess it was worth it, because the ending was a little funny, just to see like Adolf Hitler, all these other people in the Nazi company, just seeing all of that, like they got burned off into a theater, and it started to get really insane. That aspect, that was kind of fun to look at, but again, like the whole story concept was just veered away towards something else that I just don't have a fascination for. The story itself was like, I guess it's not bad, you can have some emotion for it, but it's not what I signed up for, man. And
no, I'm right there with you. When I went and saw the movie, I was intrigued by the trailer. You know, I was excited for it because they were showcasing, you know, Brad Pitt's role in this movie, and like it's kind of dark humor. And then we got catfished. We got a completely different movie. Yes. You know, that was telling a completely different story, and I just didn't like it. So you're in good company with that opinion there, man.
Okay, good. So you haven't seen the movie, have you, Durban?
No, I haven't. Yeah.
No, I don't think you're missing much.
No.
Okay, so I guess that's it, guys. So thank you both for being in this podcast, for being the first guest on our podcast, man.
Yes, I'm excited.
All right, so Durban, tell everybody out there where they can find you and what you usually do on your channel.
Well, you could find me on Durbania. So on my channel, I do movie reviews, I rank movies, but the unique thing I do is I try to also look at movies through a Christian perspective. Sometimes I go really deep with a thing called a theological analysis. Sometimes it's a little bit more shallow, where looking at it through the lens of a Christian, it's really fun to just pull out some of those little Christian messages that you can find in these type of movies. And I've been going through The Chosen and building quite an audience kind of going through that. So if you're a fan of the series The Chosen, come hang out with me and let's talk about it.
There's actually a movie that's going to be, well, not a movie, but like an episode.
A brand show that's going to be released in theaters. Being released with the Christmas special, which is a concert, music, and all that stuff, coming to theaters as a Fathom event. That is a really big deal. Nice. And really exciting. Yeah.
I actually am going to see that. So that's honestly awesome to see.
I got to be on set for that, and I'm telling you, it's going to be awesome.
Nice. So, Steve, where can the people find you at?
Well, my address is 94. No, I'm joking. You can find me on YouTube, just like Durban, and I do movie reviews sometimes. depending on how much time I have to edit. But my channel is also evolving more into live watch parties, live discussions about recent movies that we just seen, and also every week Sunday at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, PM Eastern Standard Time, you can catch me, my son Seth, Ramon from Hit and Miss TV. We talk about all the past week's top entertainment news stories in a segment called Drive By News. But again, you can find me as Film Trigger on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Vero, Twitch, all of them, I think. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much once again for being on the first guest to be on this podcast. And thank you guys for actually watching this. If you stayed around for the whole 2 hours that we've been talking and rambling onward. Thank you all so much for listening in. Be sure to subscribe if you have not, or check out these other guys' YouTube channels and all their other social media platforms. And we'll be sure to see you in the next video.